Okay, class. Now we are going to talk about mobile marketing, advertising on mobile phones. Um, so this thing called a mobile phone is a very unique kind of device. And it's basically bringing together of the telephone and the computer, making it very small so it can fit in your hand or in your pocket. And I kind of think of it like when I'm walking around with my phone, that this little device is like a lifeline, or it's like a constant source of information. I almost visualize like there's this tube or hose or connected to it, um, in which all the information in the world can fit. And it's sort of like those old-fashioned divers. There was one of those on SpongeBob called the Cyclops, except I looked at the videos for the Cyclops and there wasn't any hose for some reason. He seemed to just breathe sort of in the water. But the old first undersea diving suits, you can see a pretty old one here. You'll see the diver has weighted boots, so he or she doesn't float up to the surface or float somewhere else. And there's this watertight suit. I don't think it's even rubber. I think it's some kind of other material. But then there's the helmet, and the helmet is literally attached to a hose. A hose is attached to the helmet, and there's a motor up on top that pushes air into the hose. And so the diver can only go so far, though, unlike us with our mobile phones. Here's another way to look at what mobile phones are for us. And just leave your phone behind for a day sometime and see what it's like, just walking around and trying to deal with things the way we used to, some of us older folks. And you'll see we used to have these things called payphones. Now they're just, if they exist at all, they're vehicles for out-of-home advertising. It's an excuse to put up an out-of-home ad. And there aren't that many of them around anymore. But people used to have to use payphones to make an out-of-home phone call. And so the basic technology uses radio waves. And it involves satellites and, these goofy looking cell towers. This is a 3G network. 5G has to have a lot more towers and transmitters. But your phone sends to a tower that sends to a satellite. And the satellite bounces signals and sends it to the tower near the person that you're talking to. And so it's this amazing technology enabled by satellites. This is a picture. I Googled all the satellites around the world, and this is a picture of all the satellites. It's something like 20,000, give or take, satellites all around the world now. It sort of looks like a chia pet, our beautiful Earth, when you blow up the size of the satellites a little bit. A lot of satellites up there these days. And, I always love to go back to the good old radio spectrum. We talked about this. You'll remember when we talked about radio technology being introduced originally, that sound could be sent by a radio wave at the speed of light. And then some brilliant inventors figured out a way to send a picture along with the sound on the different spectrum of the radio waves. And so here you have the radio wave spectrum as part of the overall electromagnetic spectrum. And this is in megahertz, gigahertz, and a hertz is 1 cycle per second. For radio waves, a cycle is the distance from one wave crest to crest. And remember how, I obviously didn't, I don't think I did it with your class, but just if you put your arms straight out around you, you are surrounded by waves of sound and image, etc. And you see where the cell phones fit in. AM radio, you got remote controlled toys, broadcast TV, and then right in there, a little bit past that, you have cell phones. So all these things, these wireless sending technologies, reliant on the radio wave and the electromagnetic spectrum. So we're going to talk about history and background, trends, some of the players in the business, and some strengths and weaknesses. And again, of course, as with internet media, this could be its own class, and maybe will be, probably will be. So, of course, there's just an explosive growth rate overall. Yes, it puts the internet at our fingertips constantly. And at some point, there'll be more voice activation, I think. I mean, that's where Alexa and Siri are taking us. So it won't be so much the fingertips, but your voice that makes things happen on your device. People check their mobile devices 150 to 200 times a day. Now, overall, we've said that U.S. media trends, there's just a huge move from non-digital to digital. I think we could also add there's a movement from sort of vaguely measured in terms of impressions, etc., to more concrete measurement with clicks and purchases being trackable. And all media types want to be more measurable. They're all trying to. There's a fragmentation of audiences, except for big events like the Super Bowl and the World Series. By the way, I'm going to do something a little goofy here. Because what the heck? Here we are. Measurability. And there we go. And then I'm going to save it. Because that's the kind of guy I am. And I think that makes the point. By the way, I attended a very interesting presentation. Some people who work on Amazon, one woman who worked at Amazon, and then a gentleman who works at their agency who actually is an adjunct here. Don't really know him. But last week, in mid-October, they came in for a 2-hour event talking about how Amazon is selling advertising, but just talking about Amazon in general. And one thing when they talked about video was the kind of clear realization that most entertainment video increasingly is going to be streamed, and you'll look at it when you want it. You used to have to wait for a show to show up every Thursday night or whatever it is. And, CBS had the great Thursday night, etc. But, in fact, sports may be the only time synchronous content left. I think that's an interesting observation. And, of course, with internet, there's an overall move from desktop to mobile. And then this little lovely-looking elaborate slide, which we've shown a few times, when we look at the history of media in the U.S., that mobile is where we are now. In terms of history, the first devices were pretty clunky-looking things, introduced in the early 80s, SMS in 92, Wi-Fi in 93, iOS, Apple in 2007, 62 million in 2010. There are now 3.3 billion smartphones worldwide. And of course, many of them are iPhones, but there are also Androids out there. Let's look at ad spending now. In the U.S., this is from 2015 to 20. Obviously, it's projected for 2020. This is in billions, and these are types of advertising: display, search, SMS. And you'll see that display and search are just about equal and projected to be close to $90 billion by the year 2020. Now, when we look at companies, surprise, surprise, once again, we have the same two behemoths, leviathans of internet advertising, Google and Facebook, scooping up a lot. And you see Amazon over on the right, but they've got plans. And they're already running advertising. You may barely be aware of it. But they're basically doing, you could say, sponsored searches, so that when you look for a certain product, the search will come back. It'll say advertising, I believe, or it'll say sponsored. But people are paying to come up first when you look for certain types of products on Amazon, and they're doing other types of things as well. But by the way, they claim, unlike the other two master companies, Google and Facebook, to put their customers first when they run the advertising. So they're trying to improve the customer experience with the advertising, not just, let you be hit right and left for the money, quote unquote. We'll see. This comes from a couple of years ago, but it's definitely still true. This is something I picked up from the Interactive Advertising Bureau, the IAB, which I've talked about before. Very, very valuable resource and website, and a place you can get an amazing training. And I've taken a class or two there myself, gone to events there. But basically, this chart shows, in blue, it shows the amount of time spent with a different thing or device. And then the red shows what percent of ad spending. So this says that basically that TV and radio get about the same share of ad spend as time spent with a device. Print gets a lot more of ad spending, although that obviously is going down. So you don't spend that much time with print, and especially when you're your age, unless your professor asks you to intersect with it and talk about it, what it's like, as we do with our MMJ assignments. But so mobile, you spend a heck of a lot of time with mobile, but it does not yet get anywhere near its share of ad spent as it does share of your time. So there's room for growth. That's the point. And this is desktop versus mobile, and mobile is already exceeding desktop. So these are these two great sites. Let's see if we can get to this one. This is the Mobile Marketing Association, and this is the Trade Association for mobile advertising. Okay, so outlining strategies, case studies, all kinds of interesting things going on. Lots of members there. Programmatic, placing lots of ads on mobile, of course. So this is a very interesting. Here are some of the people who are involved in them. So they're a pretty hot outfit. In the IAB, woo! I sort of feel like you looked at the man behind the screen with that one. Okay, IAB we've looked at, but IAB, by the way, encompasses mobile. So MMA is may get gobbled up in some form at some point. You never know. I'm going to stop things here and pick up in a minute.